Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming today. We're now in week 14 of our Survive and Thrive webinars, which we've been running in collaboration with Gatwick Diamond Business. Today we're going to be talking about apps. So joining me on the panel will be, hopefully, Antoinette from Just Helpers Cleaning Agency. We've got Chris Hare here, who is founder of Hare Digital and has been working with us at Sussex Innovation Centre for the past couple of months. So Chris is going to be leading Q&A session with the rest of our panel. Sussex Innovation Centre members Peter from U2 and Ola from Dash Rides. So just a couple of housekeeping bits. There's obviously, hopefully you've already all seen the chats, so please, we're getting updates from Jeremy Taylor on what the Chancellor's telling him at the moment, or telling us at the moment. Please feel free to drop anything you want to share in the chat, and then if you've got any specific questions for the panel or for Chris, then just pop those in the Q&A. All right, over to you guys.
Hello. So it's probably best to give you a bit of a background about me, but essentially I ran a digital agency of 15 staff for 5 years, which has recently turned into a consultancy, and now I'm a kind of a CTO for Hare and currently the Sussex Innovations Chief Technology Officer, helping them move towards a new digital future. And so when I was at the digital agency, a big part of my day job was building web and mobile apps. We did it every day for 5 years. And before that, I was a developer, freelance developer anyway. I have a bachelor's and master's in computer science with business. And I've also won a couple of awards. So I'd like to think I kind of know what I'm talking about. So essentially, I'm the resident expert. And what will happen is the panelists will ask me questions. They'll tell us a bit about their story and then ask me questions regarding how or any advice they might need or where they need to go from now. And obviously, if there's any questions from the attendees, feel free to put them in the chat and I'll also answer those too. So first we'll go to Peter, who will fill us in about his company, U2, and his ambitions for an app.
Sure, okay. So I'm Peter, as Chris said. I am the founding director of U2, which is billing itself as the Fitbit of climate change going forward. Now, I've run a digital agency myself as a web agency for the last 20 years, and I had a bit of an epiphany last year with my son, who's 10, who told me that life wasn't fair because I'm going to die of old age, but he's going to die of climate change. And that just really hit me right there. And I thought, I've got to change this. I've got to do something about it. I've got to do the best I can. So putting together my background, which is environmental science, and my history as an app developer or a web app developer, I did a lot of research around the concepts. And I found that 85% of people now in developed countries think it's a big problem. 50% of Britons think climate change has the potential to end the human race. So that led me to ask why we're doing so little about this as a community, as individuals. And I think what I came to, and this has driven me towards the app, is that there's a lot of confusing and contradictory information out there. And the scale of the problem is just so vast. So what we're seeing is a real phenomenon of climate change helplessness among some people. So what we're looking to build is a tool that will help people make practical and effective individual change through green pledges. And what we want to do is track the impact of those changes over time and track the impact of those changes as they scale over users. So when I talk about pragmatic and effective things I can do, I'm just talking about something as simple as switching dairy milk in your daily latte for oat milk and seeing the effect that has in terms of real reduction of CO2, real reduction of resource use. And that's got to be backed by hard data, because this is unpicking that problem of people not knowing how effective the changes they're making are. And so the other idea that we have within the app is to connect people into tribes to try and get activism at local, national and regional levels. So, for example, we're hoping to pilot at the University of Sussex. So University of Sussex students are finding that although the university has declared a climate emergency, a lot of the rest, the sort of catering facilities are still using disposable cutlery, disposable plates. So that's the sort of thing that we think an app could bring people together in a very social way to kind of focus attention and affect change at the local level. And then that would scale up over time to regional and national. So what's our journey so far? We've kind of realized that this has to all be built on data. So we've got a back-end database, which has effectively a recipe book for the carbon impacts of various materials and resources that enable us to work out how much carbon is embodied in a dairy milk latte, how much carbon is embodied in a hamburger, so on and so forth, right? And then originally, obviously, because I had the background in web development, this struck me as a web app, but life is really lived on phones, and people, all the daily activities, all the behaviors we want to modify are things people will do when they have their phone, changing the way they commute to work, changing the kind of food they eat. So we definitely need an app. And at that point, I kind of go, all the experience I've had over the years sort of is put to one side, and I have a lot of questions for Chris. So we're currently fundraising. We're hoping to have our funds in our pocket by December. So we've got a few months to kind of build a strategy and work out which way we want to take this forward. And I guess the first thing is, because what we're doing is a quite potentially complex app, there's lots of different moving parts to it. There's the activism side, there's the data side, there's the behavior tracking side. I'm really questioning, Chris, whether I want to build a team, again, having run an agency, or whether I want to outsource development. Now, the background to that is I know that as a tech-led company, ultimately I will need a development team. But I'm just wondering what you think is the right time to form that development team. I've had experience with outsourcing in the past. We had a set of Ukrainian devs at one point, which disappeared when they were being hunted down by the Russian mafia. So I've had bad experiences. I know other people have had very good experiences. So I would really value your thoughts on whether I start with outsourcing and who I look for that sort of outsourcing expertise.
Yeah, it's a really good question, actually. And considering your background in web development already and your technical knowledge, you could pretty much project manage this yourself, couldn't you?
Potentially, yes, but I'm wondering if it's the right way to do it.
Sure. So I always recommend, when you're looking at building an app, I always look at making sure that the MVP is built as close as home as possible. The reason why is that you need to be quite agile. You need to move quite fast. Features need to change. You need to essentially understand the customer. And then as you're understanding the customer, rapidly change that app.
Yeah.
And then, so you're just constantly iterating. So that the lean startup model is essentially you iterate and you improve and you're constantly moving forwards, right? Until you find something that hits the sweet spot that you can charge and you can make money on. The issue with outsourcing is there's a delay, and not just in terms of time. You know, time zones make a big difference and people don't understand that. One of my clients is in America, and every time I had to kind of deal with something, there was always this delay, and we couldn't jump onto a phone call to say, oh, we need to know an answer straight away. We had to really understand that problem and think in advance. So the other issue with kind of outsourcing is that you're not in control as such. You're giving away, you're trusting them to essentially build an app on your ideas and your designs, depending on how good they are, and hopefully at the end of that, something's going to come out of that process that you can use. Most of the time it doesn't, and that's unfortunate. When I've seen the best way of outsourcing apps, the best ways I've seen it done is when the company has a tech team in the UK and they need to rapidly scale or expand the capacity to build apps, right? And so all the project management is done in the UK, all the designs, the UX design is really important. The UX design side of it is done in the UK with you. sat next to you essentially as you're giving your ideas, that the building and designing it, and then get that across to your tech team in the UK to kind of flush out the architecture and then scale that. Essentially, it's called offshoring. So you have like an offshore team out in either Eastern Europe. Not heard great things about India. I mean, personally, I've had experiences with India, but I haven't heard great things elsewhere. Just mainly not because they're bad developers, just that they've got their standards maybe not as high as ours when it comes to developing apps. So Eastern European countries are my usual go-to, which you've obviously had experiences with. But again, there's trade-offs, right? So you never quite know what you're going to get. Does that answer some of your?
Yeah, that does answer some of the questions. I think it kind of, particularly the point you brought up about iteration and iterative development in those early stages, and the fact that we're going to make mistakes. I think that's something I've kind of acknowledged, and I think it leads on to my next question, which is perhaps slightly more technical, I guess. I'm really trying to sort of make, because we know that the app is going to rely on a lot of self-reporting to start with. As time goes by, we're going to connect to APIs, we're going to connect to open banking, we're going to have lots of ways of people tracking what people do without them inputting themselves. But in the early days, there'll be a significant amount of self-reporting. And so we're going to have to iterate as we find ways to sort of encourage people to do that and to work out what's effective and how to get people to interact with the app on a very regular basis. So that led me to wonder whether a progressive web app or a native app, whether there's any significant difference between the two approaches. Inherently to me, and this is probably just because of a web background, it feels like a PWA, we might be able to iterate more rapidly and at lower cost, but I think there's some trade-offs there. Essentially in terms of the functionality we might get access to. I think initially we're really only going to use notifications. So yeah, I kind of value your input on your thoughts of those two contrasting approaches.
So I suppose, depending on how technical our audience is, let me kind of break down what the difference is and the different approaches. So essentially, we have a native app, which is what a lot of apps are built in. They're very specific to the platform itself. So you can have an iOS app, you can have an Android app. And the iOS app is built in a language called Swift, usually these days, and on Android it will be Java. And then when we move down the tier, there's other kind of platform that you can build, which is called cross-platform apps. And you could build them in things like Xamarin, which is using C#. You can use PhoneGap, which is JavaScript, and we've got React Native, which is also JavaScript, but a reactive framework version. And essentially what these platforms do is you build them in one language and then it gets compiled before you then submit them to the App Store. The next level down is a progressive web app, which is essentially an appified website. That's the way I describe them. So if you went on a website, you kind of think it's an app, in the way the buttons are laid out, the way it feels, and it works very well on a responsive screen. Now, when we start going down into the progressive web apps and web app functionality, essentially we're using a browser that's in a frame on the phone, and that can have a limited amount of functionality. You can't do everything that you'd want to do in the likes of a cross-platform app or a native app. And that includes accessing functionality such as, like, I don't know, the camera or the compass or the calendar and stuff like that. Things that you might find integral to the design of your app. Now, a lot of people can get away with not needing this because the progressive web app allows, via something called service workers, to give you notifications, and actually you can get locations as well. So if that's all you're needing, a progressive web app is quite a good option. And obviously a tier below that is just the bog standard web app. You know, just make them go onto a website, and instead of, you know, making them have an app on the phone. The difference between a progressive web app and a normal web app is that you want to notify. You want to do push notifications. So there's a big criteria. So a lot of people who want an app tend to want to have a push notification directly to the user, right? You don't get that level of interactivity on any other platform but an app, right? So you pick up your phone, it pings, and you can hear, you can see directly that the app wants to do something with you, and that's powerful, right? And that creates this stickiness.
Yeah.
So when it comes to kind of progressive web apps, which is what you're talking about, there's some disadvantages with progressive web apps. One, getting it through the App Store is quite tricky, right? You don't necessarily you're not going to be guaranteed to get that app published on the App Store. Play Store, they're a bit more friendly with it. So Google kind of led the progressive web app movement, and therefore you can get them published on the Google Play Store, but there's still criteria that you still need to meet, that makes sure that the app is decent and it's worthwhile, right, for the app. You've downloaded plenty of apps in the past, I'm sure, that are terrible. So that's a really good point. Yeah. So another point to take into account is that progressive web apps, they're not as fast, and they're quite power hungry, right? So they don't work as well as like a native app, and a cross-platform apps is a bit more in between the two as well.
Right.
Okay.
That answers a lot of what I was wanting to know. I mean, I guess I hadn't realized the difference in performance and battery use of the two approaches. If you were to do native, what do you think, from what you're saying, the gap between a cross-platform app and a native app is less, right? But would you advise, if you were starting out as a startup, to build native for one platform and then roll out to the other platform later, or to build cross-platform immediately?
Cross-platform.
Yeah.
So if you want the best experience, user experience, when you're building your app, and it's really important, and your app is not that complex, I mean, you can use native, but you've got two different languages you're going to have to learn. You got or hire two developers. You know, most Swift developers are not Java developers, and most Java developers are not Swift developers. So you're going to always have the issue of having, you know, to find the money for two developers, whether that's an agency or whether that's, you know, you're literally hiring them in your office. So there's that point. Now, cross-platform is a good middle point, but even then, I think that's still a bit overkill. There's plenty of things that you need to kind of consider before you even get to an app. Like, do you really need an app? Is an app the thing that you actually want to develop? Because a lot of people think that you need an app to do a lot of the functionality, but you know, you being a web developer know that you can pretty much do everything via a website, right? If not, you know, if not more so.
Yeah.
So the other thing you got to take into account is that the amount of developers on the market, right? So there's a hell of a lot more JavaScript developers on the market at lower rates, right? Yeah. So that means if you're building a cross-platform app or a PWA, you essentially got bigger choice, right? Yeah. You can put, there's more people, and they're lower, right? That their salaries are lower, so therefore you can get them cheaper. When you got like an iOS developer or an Android developer, they're quite in demand, so they're constantly needing. They're constantly bumping up their salary or their contract rates. Is that helpful?
So, yeah, no, that's great. That's great. I mean, and of the cross-platform approaches, which do you think is flavor of the day, I guess, or you know, again, thinking potentially about a constrained developer market, or whether one of those technologies that you mentioned, I think you mentioned PhoneGet, you mentioned Xamarin, you mentioned React, right? Which of those you would kind of lean towards now?
So if you were doing a cross-platform app, so React Native is having its day at the moment. It's very popular, but there's established agencies using all three. I would say a lot of people have found that React Native is essentially using the React framework, which there's a lot of developers using the React framework at the moment, and therefore more likely to get a React developer. When you're using something like Xamarin, that's C#, so obviously you're going to need a .NET developer. And there's plenty of those, although they can be slightly more expensive just because of the corporate world that .NET developers have come from. So they have a higher value, or perceived higher value.
We're not talking about value, we're talking about cost, right?
And then obviously PhoneGap again is JavaScript, but that's more pure JavaScript.
Okay, great.
So React Native is probably the one that's most popular, and there's a lot of people moving towards that. That's
brilliant. Thanks, Chris. Obviously, I don't want to monopolize the webinar. That's been really, really helpful. So thank you very much for that. That's great.
No problem at all. Cool. So who's next? Is it Antoinette? I'm glad that you've managed to join us. Oh, I can't hear you, Antoinette.
Sorry about that, everybody. I'm having a mad London day where I'm trying to set up 3 different storage units and have this smack bang in the middle. So I was stranded on Tower Bridge and couldn't park, but I'm here now.
Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate that. Obviously, you're doing very well at the moment. The fact that you're opening a new location, so well done. So the fact that you could join us and give us your time, it's really valuable. Thank you.
I wish I'd sat in this seminar 2 years ago. So even just listening to the last 15 minutes has given me all the knowledge that all the questions that I should have been asking 2 years ago. So
thank you.
Just to put this into context for everybody, we are a cleaning agency, and we recognised maybe 3 years ago actually that there was nothing in the industry for small to medium-sized businesses that created a sort of end-to-end user experience for a business owner first of all, but within that had a powerful scheduling app, so that admin in the office could schedule everything, and then the field, our colleagues in the field could pick that up in real time. There are lots of different things that are out there. There are lots of things that you can plug in and connect. There are lots of near fixes, but there was nothing that really was as detailed as we needed it to be. So we paid for something off the shelf that we could make slightly bespoke, and that's been a disaster. It's a web platform based thing, but even the basic functionality that we needed hasn't worked. And so about 2 years ago, we commissioned someone from amongst our network, actually, so someone really well recommended, that had developed all sorts of websites and business management systems, and we're doing app development as well, and kind of started to build on trust, really. So naivety, mistake number one. I think because I don't have a tech background at all. I'm great at cleaning, I'm great at people, I know how to do that, and I trust that when somebody else as a business owner is saying, I've got this expertise, I'm trusting that that's the case. So if you're like me and you're just starting out on your journey, I'd say one of the big things is to learn a little bit more, to sit in on webinars like this, to talk to tech-based people, even just to get some of the basic language. So all of the words and acronyms that you've thrown out just now, I actually understand now. I know what they do, but I at least understand them. I understand enough to ask the right questions, or to figure out what I don't know and go somewhere else and ask those questions again. So number one, if you're in my position, shape up on some of these basics. Like, what are the languages? What does it mean to be web-based, native-based, iOS, etc., etc. The second thing is, don't take anyone on trust. Actually, find a friendly tech person that you know that can help to translate. So a year and a half into the project, I ended up hiring a project manager, and I wish I'd had her on board 2 years ago, because it's like she's been worth every penny. So that's helped me. What I realized as a business owner is that I speak the language of my business. I really don't speak the language of tech. And even when I do have the vocabulary for tech, I still don't speak the language. My thought process is very different, I've realized, to the average wonderful tech person. So we had a company where the director was based here, but her offshore team were based in India. And we've recently just had to bin the whole lot. So in March, we'd just come into so many problems. So they'd kind of given us a for the job price. And within a year of that, I think they very quickly realized the scope of what we needed was massive. I had no idea. I knew it was a big system, but I had no idea to what length. And once they realized that, they kept trying to bolt on more money to get it done. So I was kind of held hostage for about the last year. And as we went into the COVID crisis, I just lost so much faith with them, really. And we were really fortunate that we have a client who was on gardening leave and was in between one very big company and another. So he's a high-level developer, but a high-level project manager as well, and just said he'd take a look at stuff for us just to help us find our way. And he was very diplomatic, but he basically said it's not the best coding that he's seen. And if we were thinking about moving on to a different team, now might be the time. So now we've got another team in place. We had, and I didn't know what a wireframe was 2 years ago. So I was being told that what I was being shown was a wireframe, really wasn't. I didn't understand about architecture. I realized that they were kind of building as they went, that there were no wireframes. And so we're kind of back to ground zero now, where we're working with another offshore team based in Moldova. I always get my M's wrong. Owned by 2 Americans. So that's been quite an interesting dynamic as well. Definitely the time lag. It's only a 1 hour time lag, which means that we can almost have real time conversations, which is great. And we're just literally building the roadmap right now. And I'm realizing what a completely different journey this will be. Sorry, a lot of spreading.
No, I really appreciate that. Thank you for sharing and sharing the pain. And, you know, sometimes it can be quite hard to share the problems you've had on that journey as well. So I really appreciate that. And I think it's a really good point to kind of pick up on the fact that you found a really good project manager who understood the language and understood what they were talking about. And I iterate that is so important. You need a translator. I call them a tech translator. The people who sit down with you, understand the journey, and take you with them. You give them their ideas, and they become an extension of you, right? And it's so important that you find someone that you trust as well, and that's hard, right? And that recommendations, big thing, references, massive. You know, who have they spoken to? Who have they worked with? Who can you get a reference from? It's just like you wouldn't employ someone without a reference. So why would you use a contractor without a reference? So that's a big point too. And I like the fact that you have offshored, but the owners of the company are essentially Westerners who have had the experience and understand the knowledge of managing a team, and then taking that to Eastern Europe, which I knew would be better than India, which you've basically said what I've been saying before, and that's really interesting because it does work and it's really important. But the fact that you've got someone here in the UK that you're telling all these ideas to, you're iterating, you're moving through that. So you're on the right path, and I don't feel like I can add anything else, to be honest. It sounds like you got it sewn up.
It was helpful, Peter, to hear about that whole progression from web-based platform to a native app. So our current guys are saying start with a web platform, like we can do the majority of that,
yeah.
And then agilely over time, we'll start to look at apps. So that's been quite reassuring. to hear that.
Okay.
But also just to throw out there, my project manager is about to go on maternity leave. So if there is anyone out there staring at us that wants to pick up that mantle, we are recruiting right now. So I'd love to hear from you.
I'm sure I've got connections that I can put you in touch with.
Awesome.
We've got
Is there any other
questions come in, I think. So there was one here from Sid. I'm looking at the Visa platform for my app at present. Any comments on this service?
The Visa?
Visa.
How'd you spell that?
B-E-E-Z-E-R.
Personally, I've
no
never
comments.
Heard of it.
Haven't heard of it.
It's professional app builder. Okay, so okay, it looks like a bit like a no-code solution. 2 seconds. Got to do my investigations.
Okay, you investigate, because there's actually a question came in here for Peter as well, which I think you've answered, but I don't think everyone saw the question or the answer. So it's regarding how you were funding your app.
Yeah, it was a question as to whether we're doing it privately or via crowdfunding. And I think for those that haven't considered crowdfunding, it's not, there are things you need to think about when you're crowdfunding. I think one is very much how much equity you want to give away. I mean, that's true in both situations, but crowdfunding now seems to require around about 50% of the money you want to raise, that you raise that before you go out to the platforms, because everybody wants to back a winner, and it's very easy to have very little committed funding and then actually have your project sitting there at 0% funded or 1% funded for the entire duration of the run. So crowdfunding is definitely something we want to look at in future. I think realistically what we need is a bit more traction before we get to that point. I think, for equity crowdfunding, we want to go to see real numbers of real users and show that the platform's well underway and growing strongly. I think what we're looking for now is probably private investors who share the mission and really want to be involved at a very early stage and are prepared to take a bit more risk.
Yeah, I'd agree on that. And it's really important to show that you're gaining users and potentially demonstrating they'll pay for that app as well. When you go to an investor and you tell them, this is what you want to do and this is your vision, they're not interested. It's not going to work. And if they do, they'd want 99% of your equity. So which is no good. They also won't. They often don't invest in companies with no tech founder. So if you're going into this, you need a tech founder usually.
Of course.
So you either need to co-found with someone or you hire someone, but whatever, you need someone techie to get investment, and you need traction. You need users and you need the potential for people to pay and demonstrate that. And obviously the further along that journey you are, the lower the equity they'll ask for and the more money they'll give you. But saying that, I think it's just good business, right? The lean startup model is all about creating MVPs and iterating and moving forwards. And obviously the best way to do that is to do it, bootstrap it. And then once you've got the model, you understand where you're going, then you go to an investor and scale that, because then you can leapfrog all your competitors. You can rapidly add features, make it more essentially diverse for your multiple target markets. There's loads of ways of monetization when you've got money behind you. So you can do advertising, or you can look at putting things behind paywalls, freemium models, and so that's a big part of the funding, kind of understanding that you know where you're going and what your business model is.
Yeah.
So just coming back to Visa, it looks like a no-code platform, very similar to something like Bubble. That's a no-code platform. Never used Visa. So the only things with these is you're going to be limited in some things that you do. I think they're great to get started with. I don't have particular experience with this platform, so I don't know if it's any good. But it's great to get something up running, being used. But actually, I think the biggest thing for me when you're looking at like no code platforms is that you can iterate quickly and move forwards, and you've actually can get your ideas out onto onto the canvas, and you can start to really understand how people are going to use it, and it's quite interactive. So UX design is a big part of that. Wireframing, really important. Get pieces of paper, each piece of paper, draw out your app, what's it going to do, and then kind of change. You can then iterate on that and create fidelity prototypes, so low, medium and high fidelity. And there's lots of kind of UX platforms that allow you to kind of design these apps quite professionally, demonstrate them to a user without actually touching any kind of code. So again, that's really important.
We go over to Ola now, and then I think we've got some more questions coming in, but we'll come to those at the end. Can you tell us a bit about your story? So you're a bit kind of, you're about to launch.
Yeah. So hi everyone, my name is Ola. I'm a student. Well, I was a student. I just finished my graduation. I actually finished today, so we got results today. So that's a good thing. So that's great.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, basically what we're working on is called Dash Rides. And essentially we are actually tackling the gig economy. So I don't know if you guys have seen it, but on the news or online, there's so many issues with the gig economy. So from grocery delivery all the way to ride sharing. And the whole purpose of why I started working what I'm working on in the first place came about a year ago when I was building an app. So a quick history about myself. So I'm actually a software developer. So I did mechanical engineering at university, which isn't very technical in terms of building apps or websites, but I taught myself how to build Android apps. So I was on a placement year about a year ago, working up in Birmingham. I just kind of got bored. So I thought, just let me build an app and let me build something, because I needed it at the time because I didn't drive. So I needed grocery to be delivered to me. So I said, I'm going to build this app and then I'm going to use it for something, just to use it and then potentially hire someone to then deliver to me my groceries basically. So I started doing that, and then I realized, as whilst building it, just how unethical and how flawed the business model actually is within the gig economy. And then around the same time, I traveled to Paris, and I had this very deep conversation with an Uber driver in Paris, and he was telling me about how much he was making and how much commission was being charged in every ride and how that's affecting him and his life. He was a single father of, I think, about 2 or 3, and he couldn't make enough, each month to provide for them as he would like to. And he was telling me that, if, without the 25%, I mean, if he was earning the 25% more every month, that would go a long way in his life. And I just figured, this isn't right, because it's, Uber, delivery, all these companies are all billion-dollar companies, and they treat their workers, because they are workers, they like to call them term them as independent contractors, but a lot of these workers are actually just workers, but they don't have the the financial stability to actually just be to live their lives as self-employed, as they like to term them. And I just figured, I'm a single. At that time I was a single co-founder, and I built a grocery app. It took me about a month to build the whole platform, the MVP. And I thought, if I can do it over a month and it doesn't cost me anything to connect, myself to a delivery driver, it costs nothing. It costs pretty much £0 to do so. So why drivers or delivery drivers being charged so much on every ride? So coming back to the UK, I spoke to my co-founder, Oscar. He does computer science, so he's a bit more techy than I am. Spoke to him about the whole idea, and we said, what, let's do it. Let's build a whole new platform, something that's completely different to what currently exists today. Let's the way we kind of what we said is, let's flip the model. Let's flip the gig economy model. Instead of the drivers or delivery drivers working for the technology, let's build a platform where the technology actually works for the drivers. So what we did was we completely scrapped the whole commission thing. So so the way we kind of describe ourselves is Dash Rides. We are the first commission-free ride-sharing platform in Europe. So our drivers keep 100% of everything you pay them, and how we make our money is basically the drivers basically pay us a monthly subscription, kind of like a Netflix, to access our app every month. So obviously, when we first came up with that day, we thought, okay, are people gonna want to use this? So I went around Brighton, just literally just ordering Ubers, just talking to drivers, just wanting to get understanding about their problem and really get to understand them as people. And every time I just listen to them, just let them talk, and then I kind of just pitch them this idea that, oh, how would you like this platform where instead of you paying commission every single ride you do, you can pay a monthly subscription at the start of every month, and then you can just keep all the profit you make on the platform. And they were all very eager, like, yeah, I would love that, I would love that, I would love that. So I said, okay, cool. So I just kept doing, more and more, I guess, research. And yeah, the more I did, the more, I got good feedback. And yeah, so I got my co-founder Oscar, we started working on it. So we said, let's build an MVP, a minimum viable product, something that just solves that problem, that just connects a driver and a rider. Just very simple. That's what we want to start off with. So yeah, so we started working on it. And then we decided to join the university startup competition called Startup Sussex. And we did that about, I think, October last year. And by January this year, we registered the company and we started building the MVP. Unfortunately, because we were also in third year as well, so we were doing exams and dissertations and stuff. So we were doing everything very, very part-time. And then COVID happened, so that kind of set us back a bit as well. But we were able to complete the MVP. So in about 2-3 months, we were able to get the MVP out there just by ourselves. So again, this is with exams and dissertations and stuff. So so currently we have MVP. I was just playing with it right now on my phone. So that's great. And we've had a couple of drivers coming into our office just here in Brighton. We've had a few today already, and they love what we're doing. Because what we're doing essentially is we're democratizing the technology. We're saying, you don't have to work for technology. We can build a technology platform that actually works for you, and you can make so much more. You can make so much more from this. So yeah, I mean that's where we're at right now. So there's actually 3 of us on the team. I'm the co-founder, I'm the CEO, and I got Oscar, who's my CTO, and he's computer science, so he builds the actual platform. And obviously we have Kendrick as well. He's our operations, so he does the people stuff. I'm not that great with people, so he kind of handles all the people, the drivers and stuff. And also we're trying to be very student focused as well initially, because we're not trying to, because Uber, let's be real, are extremely capitalized. They have so much capital, we can't compete with them right now. But what we can compete with is drivers will be making on that platform at least 25% more every month, because we don't take commission from them, and riders are paying at least 20% less on every ride they do as well. So we are the most affordable and ethical alternative to Uber at the moment, and that's going to improve as we grow. And for drivers, they're just making as much money as they can make after paying their monthly subscription fee. And our plan generally is to then take this model across the whole gig economy eventually. So delivery drivers and whatnot. And yeah, and because like I said, all you have to do is just type in delivery drivers on the internet, and you see how they're being treated and stuff. And yeah, we're just trying to just democratize the technology for everyone, for everyone that basically wants it. Because like I said, it doesn't cost anything to connect a driver and a rider. It costs £0 really. So I
think that's a really important mission-led company that you're building there. So I really appreciate that you actually felt someone's pain and that you're turning that into a solution. So well done on that. And I think I really like the fact that, looking at various companies that we've worked with in the past, and understanding how well, predicting how well they're going to succeed. The best companies were the people who actually went out and spoke to customers before they actually did anything. And I think you pretty much nailed that. You went out, you did your market research, you were interviewing people. The fact that you were ordering Ubers to do that, well done. That is the lean startup model, and that's really important. You need to really understand what they want. Will they pay for it? You know, what are they going to do? And talking about you know, the gig economy, the fact that Amazon drivers, I know Amazon drivers who were working 2 jobs because they couldn't afford, you know, to live on just the Amazon salary. But not only that, they had ridiculous targets to meet every day, and they would be penalized if they didn't deliver all their parcels. So the gig economy is a big problem. When it's a big ethical and moral problem. And I think as a you know, a country, or as the world, we need to wake up to that. So and you're highlighting some of that. So
just sorry, just one thing we'd like to say, just me and my team, is like, you know, for instance, Uber are trying to build an empire, really, and what we're trying to do is just arm the rebels. So arm the ones that actually want to go out there, and, you know, instead of being employees and whatever, you want to go out there and actually be your own kind of boss and make your own money, and not being bossed around by multi-billion companies. That's literally our mission, and that's what we're trying to do. So yeah.
So I'll give you a bit of advice. Don't go too fast too early. Keep it really simple, like so simple. Like you're thinking, why the hell would they pay for this simple? Right? It means that you got less to develop, less to look after, less problems to fix. Keep the message clear. People like simple. Do a lot of work around the aesthetics and how good it looks. But also, like, before you even get to that stage, I'd understand, you know, how much are they going to pay for these kind of things? Build a landing page, you know, that gets out to all these people and says, you know, we're building this amazing thing. Put in your credit card details, and, you know, and buy our app. And essentially what you're doing is just sticking a really important part of the process in terms of creating a paywall, right? So people say it's a good idea, but will they pay for it, right? So that's a big part. And understanding that, using A/B tests to find out what value they'll actually pay. Okay, so that's probably the only bit of advice I would give you.
Definitely.
And is there any other questions for me whilst you got me?
Not really. I mean, one thing I do want to say, just for anyone thinking about just building apps in general, because you've given advice to them already about outsourcing and stuff. But one thing that I feel like should be mentioned as well is there are a lot of students at both Sussex and Brighton that are looking for stuff to do, or just extremely bored, you know, or just want to make some extra change, you know, like tap into that. You know, just go to one of the campuses and just go to the computer science department and have a chat with one of them. It's not guaranteed they're going to say yes, but there'll be a few that, again, just want to make extra buck. And there are really good developers at universities. For instance, myself and my co-founder, for instance, like we're decent. We were able to build a solid platform within 2-3 months whilst doing exams. So imagine what someone can do that even better than us, they can do with money and with time. So that's just something I just wanted to say.
Yeah. So when I first started the agency, that's exactly what I did. I hired students, and that's how it grew. Because I couldn't afford, you know, really high level developers to work with me, and I helped build that team. Now there are drawbacks when it comes to students. You can't always rely on them. They're not always going to be around, but if you can really sell the vision and sell the passion, then yeah, they're definitely a really good workforce that you can tap into. The other thing is quite hard to access them. Going onto campus is, you know, easier said than done, but unless there's ways of meeting the two people, you know, networking events for students and visionary founders, then, you know, it's quite tricky. So there's that element to it. I mean, I essentially went back to do my master's to meet students, and that's why I did a master's. So there you go. That was my hack story. I know, right? I had to finish a master's in the process too, but I managed to and run the business at the same time. But anyway, is there any other questions that we can tap into?
Well, Sid has said that they're looking for a tech translator / project manager. Any recommendations? But maybe connecting with students, potentially.
Potentially.
I mean,
As a
the
project
careers and
manager,
sorry.
so I was going to say, as a project manager, you probably want someone who's been through the mill and done various jobs previously, just because they know what to look for in terms of problems and understanding, the kind of potential costs.
Thanks. And there was a question from a little bit earlier, which I think was probably directed at you, Peter, and what you were planning to do. How are you planning to structure pricing, subscriptions, etc., to include further updates and development? You're on mute. Oh.
Yeah, no, not anymore, hopefully. Right, so we've got a number of models that we're looking at using. I mean, the environmental side is very difficult with how it washes its shirt, how it pays for itself. We're looking at a combination of advertising, typical referrals, affiliate referrals. But one of the key things we've identified is that not that many people are still on green electricity tariffs. A lot of people from our research have shown that they would be happy or want to actively move to a green tariff. There's quite a bit of money in that. And then we're looking at structuring a number of our green behavioural challenges, looking for actual much closer partnerships with companies on those. So for example, somebody opting to move from red meat to a vegetarian product, could we find a vegetarian food supplier? Corn, the meatless burger company, sort of somebody to actually interact quite closely with. So more than just a sponsorship or an advertising deal, but actually a mutually beneficial business opportunity. But that all just requires numbers. So hopefully that answers the question.
Is there any more questions, Daisy?
Now I'm on mute. I think that was all of them. From what I can see, I don't think I've missed any more. One from Susie actually just come in. Where can we keep in touch with your developments when Dash is live?
Oh yeah, so Dash is currently we're currently testing it with a beta users. So we're just testing out that functionalities if it works. But we are also, because there's also the legal side of things as well. You have to be legal in Brighton to actually operate. So we're in the process of that as well. And we've been given the green light by the council. So we're just waiting to get the stamp of approval really. And once that's ready, I'll be sending it to everyone. Daisy can share it, I guess, and the rest of the individual center. And yeah, you guys can use it, and and just use the more ethical alternative really. Yeah.
And another last quick question that's come in for Antoinette from Anne Fay. How do you work out what your revenue model is when there are so many different types?
Yeah, so there are 4 competitors that we're keeping our eye on. One is a user base, so for how many people will be using your system. Is that what you're meaning, Anne-Faye? And we don't think we'll go down that road. What we think is that I've got to do some research into the growth points for a cleaning agency and figure out what the bracket of people. I think that's a better model. So from X to X number of employees or cleaning staff members, it will be this cost, and then factor that up a bit like DocuSign. That's a good model in terms of numbers of documents. We could equate that to numbers of users. We want it to be affordable. We want it to be for small to medium-sized businesses. So, we'll be to test it through initially, along with a couple of other cleaning agency friends. But then we want to get it to a point where people like us that are doing the right thing can afford to have a system that works for them.
Brilliant, thank you. So I think that's pretty much almost all we've got time for. I'm just going to say huge thanks to our panel, all of you for for taking part today, and thanks for everyone for coming. I'm very quickly going to promote Helena to a panelist who's going to talk to you a little bit about what's going on at Sussex Innovation. She will be. There she is.
Hello. Hello, here I am. So I'm just going to leave so I'm not disturbing everybody in the office. It's nice to be in an office again. 1 second, let me just unplug myself. So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you very, very much for really, really interesting webinar, and I think everybody learned a lot. And yeah, just, sorry, settling down. Yeah, really fabulous content. So thank you, first of all. I know Daisy's already said it, but we really, really appreciate, you know, all your perspectives and experiences. And one of the things that we're trying to do is really look at how we approach businesses and their different needs, depending on where their founders are at and their backgrounds and their ambitions. And so we're literally just about to launch some funded pieces of work that are available to entrepreneurs who are starting up or at a slightly later date. So if you've got any interest in those, I think Daisy's about to drop a link in the chat. That phrase, drop a link, has become part of our natural parlance, hasn't it, in the last 14 weeks? Daisy's going to drop a link, a phrase I never knew 14 weeks ago. But yeah, if, you know, if there is anything, if you've been inspired by today's conversation, or there is anything that we can do to help you, then do get in touch and let us know how we link drop. Do get in touch and let us know how we can support you. And thank you so much to everybody who comes and you know, does these webinars and shares their knowledge so generously, you know, in terms of their experiences, because that's so much part of what we want people to experience as part of becoming part of this network. And it's so much what we've been able to offer people during this period of you know, not being able to be physically in the same space as people. So thank you so much, and it's been a pleasure to work with you know, those of you that I've already crossed paths with, and hopefully these lead out of lockdown packages that deal with some of the biggest issues that all entrepreneurs are facing at the moment, whether that's, you know, cash flow or needing new insight into how the consumer's behaving now, which might be fundamentally different than it was 8 weeks ago, or how to pivot your business model to be able to still cope in COVID situations or post-COVID new normal. So do take a look at those new packages, because they've really come out of what businesses like you have been telling us they want to see, and what they need now. So, you know, we're here, we're available through things like this. Hopefully we can reach more people and do more good work and help more people have really successful, thriving businesses out of everything that's happened. So that's all I wanted to say, really.
I'll just jump in and add. So I'll be giving more advice away and videos on how to build apps or development, or how to get involved with the right people. So follow me on LinkedIn, and I'll be able to share some of that information.
Yeah, I'll share everyone's contact details, LinkedIn profiles and everything in the follow-up. I've dropped 2 links now. So I've dropped the link for next week's webinar, which is going to be on data storytelling. So hopefully to see some of you again next week. All right, thanks again, panel.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.